The menstrual cycle is a process that occurs after an average of 28 days in human beings. This process aims to prepare the uterus for implantation and ovulate the mature ovum to undergo fertilization by the sperm cell. The cycle will only cease if the ovum is fertilized and implantation is successful. Hormones influence the cyclic nature of this process. Four hormones are involved in this cycle, and the cycle has two phases. The hormones involved are follicle-stimulating hormone, estrogen, luteinizing hormone, and progesterone. The two phases of the cycle are the uterine and the ovulatory phase. This presentation shall focus on the influence of hormones on these two phases and the relationship between the two phases. Estrogen is the hormone that is secreted by the follicle, most specifically its granulose cells. The hormone mainly functions to help in thickening of the endometrial wall and readiness for implantation. The estrogen levels have two effects on the production of luteinizing hormone by the pituitary gland. At first, high estrogen levels serve as negative feedback for the production of LH. During the mid-cycle stage, the input of estrogen on LH production shifts from negative to positive, hence LH is produced. The anterior pituitary gland produces the luteinizing hormone, which is the hormone that is secreted when the frequency of release of the GnRH increases. It facilitates ovulation of the mature ovum. It does so by stimulating proteolytic enzymes which digest and weaken the ovarian wall, hence making it rupture and release the mature ovum. LH levels abruptly increase mid-cycle, which facilitates the ovulatory process. The LH also stimulates the release of progesterone by the luteal cells. Progesterone prepares the endometrium for implantation. This preparation is done through the development of glands and blood vessels within the uterus. These glands and blood vessels develop in readiness to provide the fertilized egg with nutrients after being implanted. The ovarian cycle involves the changes occurring in the ovary that involve maturation of the ovary, ovulation, and development of the corpus luteum. The cycle has three phases. Each phase is controlled by a hormone. The follicular phase is controlled by estradiol, and the luteinizing hormone controls the luteal stage. Under the follicular phase, several follicles are recruited for maturity. This process begins late in the previous menstrual cycle and is under the influence of the follicle-stimulating hormone. The recruited follicles are usually at the granaphin stage. The main impact of FSH is cause these recruited follicles to mature. Maturity involves the granulosa cells proliferating and the follicle acquiring LH receptors. The recruited granaphin follicles then begin competing for dominance amongst themselves until two or one become dominant and the rest become atretic. The ovulatory phase is under the influence of LH. This hormone has a sudden surge mid-cycle that causes proteolytic enzymes, specifically collagenase, to weaken the ovarian wall, so the mature ovum is released from the ovary. The LH surge also causes the completion of the first meiosis and the onset of the second meiosis of the mature oocyte. This surge also causes an increase in the prostaglandins, which cause local muscular contraction, hence extrusion of the ovum. Ovulation starts with the local weakening of the ovarian wall, which causes the formation of the stigma. The stigma then bursts, releasing the oocyte and some granulosa cells. The luteal phase involves the development of the corpus luteum. The luteum consists of granulosa cells and the internal cells of the follicle. These cells form luteal cells under the influence of the luteinizing hormone. After the formation of the corpus luteum, the mass of cells begins to produce progesterone. The uterine cycle is divided into 3 phases: follicular, secretory, and menstrual phase. The follicular phase is under the influence of estrogen. The secretory phase is influenced by progesterone, while the regression of the corpus luteum causes the menstrual phase. The proliferative phase begins immediately after menstruation. This phase is influenced by estrogen, which is being produced by the follicle. It involves the endometrial wall thickening to prepare for implantation. This thickening is caused by the rebuilding of the uterine wall in response to estrogen. The secretory phase is influenced by progesterone. This phase involves the blood vessels in glands of the endometrium. The blood vessel walls become more tortuous, increasing the surface area and contact between the vessels and tissue. The glands enlarge and acquire nutrients that would support the developing embryo if fertilization would occur. The menstrual phase shall come into play if fertilization does not occur. This phase is due to the withdrawn effect of progesterone after the corpus luteum regresses. The endometrial wall sloughs off and is shed. Blood comes from the uterine arteries that are left exposed. The 2 cycles are released to affect the hormones. These phases coincide. If progesterone is high, it will affect the stage in the uterine cycle and the ovarian cycle. The follicular phase coincides with the menstrual phase since there is no corpus luteum to produce progesterone, hence no negative feedback on the anterior pituitary gland. The secretory phase coincides with the luteal phase due to the influence of progesterone being produced by the corpus luteum.